Hey everybody, in today's video, we will talk about closures in JavaScript. A closure is a function created inside another function. It enables a function to remember and access its outer scope variables, even after the outer function has completed executing. This concept is useful for creating private variables and maintaining the state. Let's take an example to understand this concept. According to the idea of closure, we just need to make a function inside another one. So, let's make a function called the outer function. Inside this outer function, create another function and call it the inner function. In the inner function, use console.log. Now, make a variable outside the inner function and call it the outer variable. Give it a value, like I am from the outer function. In the console log, use this outer variable. It's time to call the function. At the end, invoke this outer function. Nothing will happen. To see the result, we have to run the inner function inside the outer. Let's call the inner function at the end. We've shown the text I am from outer function. Everything inside the outer function is part of something called a closure. Inside the outer function, we have another function. This inner function can reach everything within that area, including the outer variable. A cool thing about closures is that any variables are like secrets outside of the outer function. Now, I'll try changing the outer variable. If I give it a new word, like hello, you'll notice that we still get the same result, but nothing changed. We can't alter the outer variable from the outside because it's like a secret, private. Let's go ahead and remove this line. We can also make the function returnable. Currently, we've called the inner function. Instead, remove that and use the return keyword. We want to return the inner function, but this time, don't use parentheses when returning the function. If you do this, nothing will show up on the console. When we're returning the function, we need to create a sort of closure. Let's make a variable called closure function and set it equal to the outer function. Don't forget the parentheses. This will assign the return function to the new variable closure function. Now, use this new variable closure function, but remember to include parentheses. It should display I am from outer function on the console. Let me give you another example. Closures are useful for keeping track of a variable state. Let's make a simple counter program. I'll create a function called increment. In this function, I'll make a variable called count and set it to 0. I'll increase the count by 1. Count equals to count plus 1. Then use console.log to show the current count. Now, when we call this increment function, it will add 1 to the count. If we call it again, invoke the same function one more time. Every time we call the increment function, it displays 1 because it starts with a new count variable and resets its value. I can't make the count go beyond 1 because it keeps resetting. However, with closure, we can maintain the state of the variable. Take this variable out from here and put it outside the function. Now, it should show 1, 2, and 3 on the console. We called the increment function 3 times. This function remembers the value of the count variable because we moved it outside the function. That turns it into a variable shared across multiple calls. However, there's an issue with the count variable. It lacks security. It's a global variable, and anyone can change its value. If I set the count to a random number, you'll see that it alters our output. Even though we're keeping track of the variable state, it's not a private variable. To make it private, enclose this code in another function. Let's create an outer function called counter. Now, cut this code and paste it inside the outer function. Make one more function that can display the result of the count. Name it getResult. Use console.log with the count variable. Right now, we have 2 inner functions inside the counter function. To make them accessible, use the return keyword in curly brackets. Inside the brackets, write the name of the first function, increment, and then add a comma followed by the name of the second function, getResult. When we return multiple functions like this, it creates an object with properties increment and getResult. Now, let's create a closure instance named calculator. Set it equal to the outer function, which is counter. The calculator variable now has references to both increment and getResult functions. To make the functions work, type calculator before using the increment function. Repeat this line 3 more times. We ran the increment function 4 times, which is why it shows us 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, let's use the second function, getResult, by typing calculator.getResult. The final count value is 4. Now, I want to create a new function that can decrease the count by 1. It's easy to make this function. Just copy the increment function and paste it here. Change its name to decrement. And make it subtract 1 from the count. In the return statement, also include the name of this new function. Now, let's use this function. Copy this line, make a copy of it, and instead of using increment, replace it with decrement. It will reduce the count value by 1. We can add more flexibility to the increment and decrement functions. Right now, they only increase or decrease the count by 1. If you want to change the value by a different number, here's how you can do that. First, we need to pass the desired value as a parameter to these functions. Instead of writing 1, put value in its place. In the console log, use template literals. Type added and I will use a placeholder and insert the value that was added. Then, write the result using a placeholder, and include the current count value. In the decrement function, also pass the value parameter. Set count to be count minus value. This way, you can adjust the count by any value you choose. Copy the console log statement and paste it here. Replace added with subtracted. Utilize the same console log in the getResult function, which will display the final result, so write here final result. Now, we have the flexibility to provide values during invocation. For example, if I want to increase by 10 in the first call, by 5 in the second call, and in decrement function pass 7. Initially, increases by 10, and the final count is 10. Next, increase by 5, and the final result becomes 15. Then, decrease by 7, and the final count becomes 8. The overall count is 8. So, this is our today's topic. A closure is a function created inside another function. It enables a function to remember and access its outer scope variables, even after the outer function has completed executing. This concept is useful for creating private variables and maintaining the state. If you find it helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos.